Welcome to Your Voice Unlocked, the show dedicated to all things singing. I'm your host, Rebecca Keogh, and today we have a special guest joining us, Gemma Milburn, a vocal coach with a unique passion for understanding the impact of tongue ties on vocal performance. Gemma has helped countless singers unlock their potential by addressing both technical skills and the challenges posed by physical factors like tongue ties. In this episode, we'll explore Gemma's insights on vocal technique, the importance of vocal health, and how understanding tongue ties can make a difference in a singer's journey. Whether you're a seasoned performer or just starting out, you won't want to miss this enlightening conversation. Let's dive in. But I'm actually so looking forward to chatting to you about this. I think we initially kind of touched base on it. I might have posted something about my baby having a tongue tie, and then you might have messaged me. Was that how it was? Or
I can't remember. Yeah, I don't know. I know we had a little chat about your baby, but I don't know how it came about. I don't remember.
Yeah, but I just for people listening, when my baby was a newborn, the doctor kind of suggested that he looks like he might have a bit of a tongue tie, which I knew kind of what a tongue tie was, but I didn't know anything about the repercussions of having one or anything like that. I the only thing I knew that, like when I did a small bit of research into it, was that it may affect babies when they start speaking. It might delay some of their like diction and pronunciation. But at the time, like I didn't really know much about it, and I didn't really see anything straight away online, even on the website of the company who does the tongue ties in our area, about like the wider kind of selection of side effects it can have. So like we decided not to go ahead and do it because one of the nurses had said if he was latching okay, because I was breastfeeding, if he was latching okay, that maybe he'll be fine. So that's the reason why we decided not to go ahead with it in the end. But now I'm wondering if we made the wrong decision, because now, having spoken to you and done some more research into it since, like it actually has a lot more consequences to the person than I initially thought. But I'd just like to maybe give you a moment to introduce yourself to the listeners and maybe give us a little bit about your backstory before we jump into the tongue tie stuff. So you're a vocal coach and kind of how you ended up in this where you are now.
Okay. That now feels like a big philosophical thing to think about. But yes, I am. I'm a vocal coach, and I probably, on reflection, became one because I've always loved singing, but also found my relationship with my voice very up and down. So I loved singing when I was tiny, and then as I became like a teenager and a young adult, my voice was really unreliable. My voice got very tired quickly. I also had really quite severe and unpredictable performance anxiety, where if I got up to perform, I would hyperventilate. I may have sung perfectly in rehearsal, and then in performance, I would just fall apart. And because I really struggled to get help with it and to find the right advice, as soon as I did start to find knowledgeable people, I kind of went down that rabbit hole of studying and training and everything myself, and then became a vocal coach. I think that really helped me for a while, because then I was able to still be involved in singing, but without having to put myself in the position of performing, which I knew wasn't always predictable or felt particularly safe for me at that point in time. And then over time, I've been able to unpick my own stuff by learning about the voice and by helping other people with theirs. And I'm now in a band and we perform, so that's kind of come a long way. But I guess I really like helping singers who are struggling with some of the things that I've struggled with. So singers who either feel like there's something amiss with their voice, something up, and they can't figure it out. If they feel like their voice gets tired quicker than it should, or if they feel like maybe they don't have the access to their range that they would like, or singers who are really lacking in confidence. Those are the favourite people for me to work with, because I've been through that journey of understanding all of that myself.
Okay, and how was it for you, like giving up performing and singing? How did that feel for you? Because I just can't imagine, through all the years and even at times feeling self-conscious or insecure about my own voice and different things. I can't ever imagine giving it up. How did that feel for you?
I don't know if I like officially gave it up, but I definitely did have about 4 years where I didn't sing at all. And that's a bit of a blur, to be honest with you. I did other things. I was a bit angry. I was just, yeah, I think I just kind of pushed it away and didn't think about it too much. It was always there, like bubbling under the surface. Um, but I think that if you are someone who loves to sing, it never really goes away. So it's like you're kind of fighting something that needs to be there. But also, I really, at that point in time, couldn't perform reliably, I didn't have a lot of choice, really.
Okay, so it wasn't like you decided like I'm not going to sing for the next 4 years. It just kind of happened that way because of the journey you found yourself on with your voice.
Yeah, I finished uni and I kind of interpreted it as because my voice would get tired very, very quickly. I kind of viewed it as people who are, some people are good at sports when they're young and then they grow out of it.
Yeah.
Like they don't have, I don't know, I guess that's how I thought of it at the time. I don't know if that's really a thing, but I thought, okay, maybe that's just something I was good at as a child, but now as an adult, I need to go and find something else to do.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what brought you back to singing?
I moved to London and I thought to myself, well, there's got to be someone here that can help. So I Googled and I read up on things and I found articles that described the problems I had with my voice. And I realised, oh, this is a thing, it's not just me. And booked a lesson with someone in London and it was really practical, really good. And I just started to kind of put one foot in front of the other again.
Okay, so like when you maybe started to understand the mechanics of the voice a bit better, it
Yeah.
gave you kind of empowered you, I suppose, because that's like how I see vocal coaching and singing teaching is like I just find it like it's a very empowering thing to be able to like give these tools to singers. And like even in the very first lesson with a singer, like there's nearly always an aha moment where the singer goes, I can't reach that note, and you give them a tool to unlock it, and then they can reach it and they're like, I never knew I could do that. It's
Yeah.
kind of like it's like the voice is there, but you're trying to learn tools to how to like access those qualities, which I think is kind of magical.
Yeah, and I love that you use the word magical because I also think that sometimes we have this preconception that singing is magic, and it kind of is, but it's not just you've got it or you haven't. And when I had singing lessons in the past, I had teachers who'd been like if I couldn't do something, they'd just sort of be like, oh well. I even had one singing teacher who said to me, why can't you do that? A certain phrase or whatever, why can't you do that? And I'm like, I don't know, like you tell me. So to have a teacher who would be like, here are some tools, this is something we can work with, and to see progress, it like opened a door to me to be like, this isn't just who I am, like you're good or you're bad, you can learn or you can train, and the problems that I'm having are recognizable issues that lots of singers have. It was cool.
Yeah. And with regards to the whole talent thing, like some people are born kind of further ahead than other people. Like some people are born with the mechanics that, maybe make it easier for them to sing or make it easier to get a desired sound. But because the voice is like a flexible instrument, it's like anything with any sport or exercise or dancing or gymnastics or whatever it is, like you can work on developing those muscles to be able to do what you want to do. So, I would just say to any singers who feel like they're not as good as somebody else or whatever, if they have any comparisons in their mind, that like it doesn't really matter. Like it just means that like you just have a bit of work to do to get to that point. And oftentimes people who are born with like say talent, they don't always work as hard because they just think I'm talented, and then you often see singers pass them by because the singers who maybe needed to work a bit harder just keep progressing, so
Yeah. And then if you have a problem, you don't know how to solve it because if you're relying on talent, it means that you don't have a toolkit to work through issues. And at some point, you're going to have a problem if you sing for a long time.
yes. And that brings me down to a problem that you have discovered that you
Yeah.
had that you didn't know what it was over the years, and that's down to the tongue tie. So would you maybe tell us what brought you to discovering that you were tongue tied?
So it was completely random and unexpected. I was working with a coach in Spain. I was working with her online, and she did a voice retreat in Spain. So I went and I had a few in-person lessons with her in Spain, which was really cool. And on the last day, she just had an aha moment. She'd recently been on some training about tongue tie. She viewed a webinar about tongue tie. So I think it was kind of front of mind. It was fresh information for her. And she suddenly kind of like, I just saw this like look of recognition flash in her eyes. She brought up all her information from that webinar, started asking me questions. And she was like, I think you might be tongue tied. So, I mean, she didn't know, because as you'll probably find out the more I talk about you, it's very difficult to actually accurately diagnose a tongue tie. But she sent me away with that information to look into. And I like rang my mum that same day and said, do you know anything about me being tongue tied? And she said, no, but your brother is. So my mum had been told when my brother was born that he was tongue tied. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I guess that makes sense if he is as well. And from what I do know, it does tend to, I'm not like, I just want to preface this by saying I'm a singer and vocal coach who knows a bit about tongue ties, so I'm not a doctor or anything like that, but it can run in families. So that led me down this whole rabbit hole of research.
Can I ask you to explain what a tongue tie is? We haven't actually said that yet, just in case someone is like, what is a tongue tie?
Yeah. So the way I like to think about it is when we're in the womb and we're developing as babies, the tongue is part of the floor of the mouth. The tongue and the floor of the mouth are the same thing. And I don't know why. Also, if this is the floor of your mouth, the tongue is attached to it. And then as we develop over those weeks, the tongue is supposed to separate from the floor of the mouth. So it's a completely separate thing. But for quite a lot of people, that separation process doesn't happen either properly or as much as it should. So the tongue remains partially tethered or even completely tethered to the floor of the mouth. And I like to think of it a little bit like having like webbed fingers or webbed toes, like some people have, rather than fully separating. There remains a connection, so that it reduces the mobility of the tongue. I'm going to say quickly as well, there are also lip ties and buccal ties. And if you have if you have a lip tie or a buccal tie, you can have multiple. You've probably also got a tongue tie.
Yeah, that's interesting actually, because I recently, my little boy has obviously got some teeth now, and I was just one day I lifted up his top lip, and I'm wondering if he does have a bit of a lip tie as well. So that got me thinking about the whole tongue tie thing again. But so it's the little kind of, is it called a vein, or like a little bit of like tissue that like holds the tongue down to the mouth right at the tip here?
Yeah, it's called a frenulum, and a frenulum is a normal thing. But for someone who is tongue tied, that frenulum is too tight. So so it restricts the movement of it.
Okay. And tell me some of the ways that your tie restricted your movement, and how it affected your singing and your overall health.
Yeah, so again, this is something that I only know now that I'm able to put it into context. I hadn't, I had heard of had tongue ties. I'd even spotted them in a few of my clients and sent them off to get a diagnosis. Didn't know that I had one. Like, I wouldn't have in a million years have even considered it. However, a lot of the things I've said already about my singing, I believe now are because of the tongue tie. So, my voice got very tired very quickly. I felt a lot of tension in my throat. I sometimes struggled with getting the balance of, well, not sometimes. My voice was overly breathy. The performance anxiety, I believe, was down to the tongue tie, because having a tongue tie people with tongue tie are more likely to mouth breathe and have shallower breathing patterns. So for me, as soon as I was a little bit nervous, I'd be breathing like that, which meant that I couldn't sing. I linked to that. My breathing tended to be more like upper chest breathing. I struggled with engaging my lower abdominal muscles for breathing. I didn't know that. Like I thought that I was doing fine, but it's got so much better since that I've realised that there was a lot of room for improvement there. And things I've noticed since have been about how the tone of my voice has actually changed since I had the tongue tie treatment. So I have much better vibrato. The tone of my voice is like warmer and richer. It's more flexible. It's easier. I have more access to my whole range. So on reflection, found low and high, like the extremes, very, very difficult. Although it's hard to remember because I've done a lot of singing training, and that's why a lot of people don't realize that they have it. It's because vocal coaching will help if you're doing technique work. Like it will help. So if I try and look back to when I was at uni and think of the issues that I had with my singing then, I can really see them all. But because I've done a lot of technique training since then, like I have actually improved a lot of the symptoms of my tongue tie over the years.
Yes, that you just like made a light bulb go off in my own head there, because like I've always had an issue singing in my lower part of my range. Like sometimes I'm not able to hit a G3 in a stable way. Like sometimes like it'll break, and like I've been to like lots of different vocal coaches over the years, and there's been different suggestions made, and like some things have worked, but it's still a reoccurring issue, and I wonder, would that be possibly because of the tongue tie? That's so
Yeah,
interesting, because that's been a
very
huge
possibly.
frustration for me as a singer and even as a coach, because in lessons like my students are able to hit the low notes no problem, and I can't always do that, and it's a bit embarrassing as a coach not to be able to hit those notes. Like I know everybody has different range, but like a G3 is not that low, like do you know.
No.
That's so interesting. Oh my god,
Yeah.
I need to look into that more.
Yeah, and I mean, when I first learned about mine, I then started looking at everybody's tongues and like kind of wanting to tell everyone that they had a tongue tie. And then I've come a bit more full circle and gone like, hold on a minute. Like what I've learned along the way is that tongues can the tongue is a major part of singing, huge. And training the tongue is hugely powerful for like basically everyone. Um, and also, a lot more people are tongue tied than we realise. So, even those who aren't tongue tied still would benefit from some. Well, I ended up going for myofunctional therapy, and I think that's it trains the tongue, the face, the lips, and I think that many people, singers, would benefit from that. But seeing as you know that your son is tongue tied, I would say definitely rule it in as something you consider for yourself. It could definitely be a reason why that's happening.
Yeah, it's interesting because like over the years like I've always been aware that my tongue has restrictions. Like I can't stick my tongue far out of my mouth and like do that with it. It just goes, the little thing here like pulls it downwards, so I can like stick it downwards, but I can't put it out and kind of wiggle it around like some people do. I can't tip my nose with it.
Right, no, me either.
If I put my, I know I looked online, it said one of the things that you can check and see about the tongue tie is if you put the tip of your tongue on the roof of your mouth and then try and like drop your jaw down
Yeah,
and see, like I can't drop my jaw very much when I do that,
yeah,
like, so there's a few little things that I think that could be a tongue tie. But now that you've said about the notes, the range of notes, that's made me kind of want to like look into it a bit more, because I would love to be able to sing all those lovely warm lower notes. Oh my god, like some
yeah,
of my favorite singers, like Yeba and I don't know, loads of different singers, like have such a beautiful range. Yeah, you've got me thinking now.
yeah. Yeah, and I think one thing that I'd like to say, because I didn't know this, is that research and knowledge about tongue ties has progressed a lot in like the last, I think, 5 years, and it hasn't trickled through to, I guess, mainstream medicine yet. There are people who are really interested in tongue tie and who specialize in it, and then there are still people who, I guess, I went to my own dentist and he put his head in his hands and told me I was not tongue tied, and he was just like, oh, you know, which is fine. And then I went and I found a specialist, and I actually saw 3 separate people who specialize in tongue tie and have had more up to date training, and they all gave me the exact same diagnosis down to the type of tongue restriction that I have. So I got 3 separate opinions. But what the more recent research tells us is that you can't often diagnose a tongue tie by looking at it. When the restriction goes all the way to the tip, that's the one that most people know about, then you can normally tell the tongue looks different. But mine didn't really look different. And the best and I guess only way to get a diagnosis is to go and see a myofunctional therapist. Myofunctional therapists are either speech and language therapists with a specialism or dental hygienists with a specialism. So they're people who know lots about the tongue and the mouth. And they do a functional assessment of not just your tongue, but your swallowing and your chewing and your eating. And they take lots of measurements. It's very technical and very in depth. And they use like ratios and how wide you can open your jaw, and it's very, very technical, because it's more about how the function of your tongue is affected rather than what it looks like. I've heard people use the term mild tongue tie, and like that isn't really a thing, and you definitely can't call a tongue tie mild by looking at it unless you've assessed how much that it's affecting that person's life. So I didn't know that I had a tongue thrust swallow, which meant the only way I swallowed was by pushing my tongue forwards.
Oh, me too. I literally just like as you were talking about it, I was just like thinking about what my tongue was doing. Just anyway, that's interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and that had a knock-on effect on my teeth. So I've always had a overbite, and my front teeth stick out forwards, and I've had braces, and they relapsed. Like every time I get rid of the braces, my teeth would go back to have it's called an overjet, and it's quite a severe one because my tongue's pushing my teeth forward all day long when I swallow. Not anymore. So the myofunctional therapy trained me, and the tongue tie release, to be able to swallow properly, so that now when I get my teeth fixed again, hopefully they won't go back to how they were before. So again, you can't tell by looking, you have to have a proper in-depth assessment. And that's why I wanted to say this. I don't know if you did make the wrong decision with your baby. I actually think you've done the right thing to kind of get more information and take your time to figure out what's the best thing to do and who to go to for advice. Because I come across people who talk about how you get the tongue tie snipped. And from what I know, that kind of snip isn't a full tongue tie release. It might release the tip of the tongue, but it's not going to address the rest of the restriction, which will go throughout the whole of the tongue. So I actually think you probably trusted your instincts then, knew that you needed to get a bit more info.
Well, thank you for saying that, because I was having terrible mom guilt over it. I felt so bad, and at the time, I just couldn't bear the thought of him having to go in and get it lasered off, because that's how they were doing it in the surgery that here is local here.
Yeah.
I just couldn't bear the thought of it, and then I was like, maybe he would have been better off getting it done when he was a newborn. You've forgotten about it by now. But anyway,
Yeah.
can I ask a question? What, did you put a video up, or I can't remember if I read this online or if it was one of the videos that you put up recently? Were you talking about TMJ and how the tongue tie can affect it?
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so again, I'm talking about this from the perspective of my experience and my reading up. So again, I'm not a myofunctional therapist, will give you a much better answer than this. Yeah. I didn't know that I had a restricted jaw. So when I went for my myofunctional therapy assessment, she was like, your jaw's really restricted. And that meant that I couldn't open it fully because the muscles on my jaw were so tight that I actually couldn't open my mouth fully. So I had to go through a process of retraining that. But to my understanding of it is that because for my whole life my tongue couldn't move properly, I'd had to compensate by keeping my jaw quite closed and quite tight to compensate. So if your tongue is meant to move up and down, I couldn't do that with my mouth open, so I had to keep it quite closed. So that the tongue and the jaw are so linked to each other that it can manifest in a lot of people having like very painful. Mine wasn't painful. Very tight or even just restricted jaws. And if you're a singer listening to this, even if you don't know your jaw is tight or painful, if you've ever had your singing teacher tell you to open your mouth more quite a lot, because I always had singing teachers being like, you need to open your mouth more, and I'd be like, I didn't know that I wasn't. That could be a sign for you as well.
Wow,
Because
this
your
is so
proprioception won't
fascinating.
be there, you just won't know that your jaw is meant to open more than it does.
That's the thing with all of this is you don't necessarily know any of this is maybe causing some issues because that's all you've known all your life. So like when you hear like for example me with the not being able to sing low notes or even the swallowing thing that I just copped on there as well. Like I thought that was the way to swallow. I thought that's your tongue does push forward. Like my tongue goes pushes forward in the back of my teeth when I swallow. I thought that was normal until right now. So it's fascinating.
The jaw can also grow out of alignment because the tongue is supposed to rest on the roof of the mouth when we're not doing anything, when we're just breathing. And if the tongue can't reach or isn't strong enough to rest on the roof of the mouth, there's nothing there up there through the development of the jaw to help it grow wide enough to fit the jaw in. So you end up having mismatched upper and lower jaw. So I have that. My maxilla, the top bone, is quite narrow. And I was very lucky that through my functional therapy, I was able to get my tongue strong enough that I can just fit it up there. But yeah, it can cause the jaw to grow out of alignment.
Okay. Um so let's just take it back to singers for a minute, right? We know that warming up is really important. Singers for step for singers to take. But I'm wondering how might having a tongue tie negatively affect your warm up with specifics if you have them.
So people who are tongue tied tend to generally be more tense. So tense in their shoulders, in their neck, in their tongue, and actually it can have a knock-on effect on the whole body. So I would imagine it would potentially mean you need to warm up longer, or that your warm up isn't as effective, or even that you can feel tired from doing a warm up that other people find helpful. So potentially working in some like gentle stretching can be really useful, even if it's like shoulders or just chin to chest, or sticking your tongue out, things like that. I mean, I think that's good for all singers, but tongue-tied people may find it even more helpful.
That's so fascinating because like you did it's mad like how the mechanics of the body and all the anatomy kind of is linked together and works together. And something else just came to me there, and I don't know if this would be related to tongue tie or not, but I just curious to see your thoughts on it. When I was in college, I discovered like I was working on my lower register, and I would do some gentle stretching, head neck rolls to the side, etc. And I realized I think it was when I put when I had my head to the left like that, I was able to hit lower notes than when I had my head to the right or up straight. Now I don't know if that's tongue related or just a muscular thing or what, but I'm just curious to know your thoughts.
Yeah, so I think a lot of this stuff could affect many singers for many reasons. The thing that sets tongue-tied singers apart is that no amount of stretching or temporarily moving your head to one side is going to solve the problem.
Okay.
It can help. You might find it beneficial, but ultimately you're still going to be tongue-tied, right? So that's the difference. So it's kind of knowing, like, am I putting a band-aid on this, or am I solving the problem? What I found, again, in my myofunctional therapy assessment was that everything was worse on the right-hand side. And I know that my right hip has always been very tense. And then when I had the actual tongue tie release frenectomy, the laser surgery, the dentist who did it commented that the fascia on the right hand side of my tongue was extremely tight. She had to spend extra time releasing it. So they kind of release the mucosa and the bit that we can see, and then they go in with I guess they all do it differently, but this particular practitioner then went in with an instrument to release the fascia, and I felt a noticeable difference on the right hand side of my body, because I've always had neck pain on the right hand side, and that has gone since. So what you're saying makes sense. There could always be lots of different reasons for these things, but I feel like what we're doing is kind of being detectives and, putting the pieces of the puzzle together and trying to get a picture of what it could be doing for you, and that does make sense. It's very possible it could be tighter on one side than the other.
Okay. And would you mind just explaining what a myofunctional therapist does? Because you mentioned about your hip, so that's not a tongue tie. So how does the hip tie into that? And is a myofunctional therapist just to do it? Just explain what that is, please.
Okay, so a myofunctional therapist, it's actually short for orofacial myofunctional therapy. So they do work with the muscles of the face and the tongue and the jaw. But where the hip comes into it is to do with the fascia, so the connective tissue that runs throughout our whole body. And there's one line of fascia in the body called the deep front line, and it runs from the tongue, runs down the body, it goes through the diaphragm, through the hips, down the legs, and into the toes. So if there's a restriction in the tongue, so in the deep front line of the fascia at the top, then it's likely going to have a knock-on effect on the rest of the body, which means it could be a reason why I had tightness in my right hip. I also always had very tight feet as well. So I would do foot stretches in yoga, and I wouldn't be able to do it. That has improved too, which is kind of interesting. Myofunctional therapists, I know what they did with me. I'm sure they put together a different program for different people, but most of it was all like tongue, face, jaw. There was sometimes shoulder and arm movements with it as well, and they do generally have a good awareness of the whole body, but most of it is to do with the face and the tongue.
Well, I mean, I suppose singing is a whole body experience. I remember being at a workshop. I think it was in London. I forget the name of the place it was in, but there was some guy there doing a talk at it. Can't remember his name. And he was talking about how a client of his had or there was a singer basically who was having issues with their singing voice. They were getting, I think, hoarseness and some instability in their tone. And I think he was some kind of physiotherapist or some kind of health professional that worked with the body. I think working with a vocal coach as well. They figured out that the person actually had an issue with their toe. I think it was many years previous, and over the years, the body had slowly but surely compensated from the toe upwards, and so the ankles twisted a little bit, then the hips twisted a little bit, then the ribs twisted a little bit, and the shoulders twisted, and so on. And then all of a sudden, you have this larynx that was actually very slightly twisted because of this issue in the toe that had started years prior.
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting when sometimes when singers come into a singing lesson, they might be surprised to do kind of stretching and things like that. But it really is a whole body experience, and it's worth exploring tension release and the rest of the body and seeing what effect it has on your singing voice.
I actually, as part of my treatment, I had to, like, it was a prerequisite. They wouldn't perform the tongue tie release surgery unless I'd had a few sessions with an osteopath or a chiropractor. It had to be like a body worker. So I think I had 3 sessions before, and then I had to go and see her again a few times afterwards, because it does have a knock-on effect on the whole body. And then in the adaptation process afterwards, so after they've released your tongue, your body's going to continue to change. So I had to keep going and having sessions with the osteopath to kind of aid that process. Yeah,
Oh my god,
it was really interesting.
yeah, that is interesting. It's so interesting. Like this whole world of like the voice is just fascinating. Um, okay, so tell me maybe some other like differences in your singing and general health since you had the tongue tie release. Well, you kind of already said some of the ones about singing, but did you mention that maybe did you have sleep apnea, or was that just one of the things that some people can have?
I didn't have it, but it can, yeah, it can be a symptom for some people, and general sleep issues, and that's to do with how well you can breathe whilst you're sleeping. So,
And how does your tongue affect the way you breathe?
well, it comes back to the tongue resting posture, resting tongue posture.
Yeah,
I've got that wrong in my head,
sounds
but
right.
where your tongue rests when you're just breathing. So it's meant to lightly suction against the roof of your mouth and just stay there lightly, gently, and that just allows you to breathe through your nose with your mouth closed. If your tongue can't rest there, your jaw is more likely to be open. You don't get as good of a seal in your mouth, and you're more likely to breathe through your mouth. And then that over time is going to, first of all, mouth breathing is actually quite detrimental to our health, which is why I've become a Buteyko breathing instructor since. And also, over time, you're going to get those issues like the palate not being wide enough to fit the tongue, and the tongue potentially not being very strong. So it's more likely to fall backwards into your airways when you're not awake and conscious. So that's one of the causes of, there's lots of different types of sleep apnea, but that is one of them. For me, yeah, and my sleep has improved a lot. And again, I didn't know I had trouble with sleeping until it got much better. And yeah, so it was almost immediately from starting the myofunctional therapy, I wear a fitness tracker, and the sleep scores that I was getting every night just went up, and I was getting a lot more deep sleep than I'd ever had. I'd always kind of wondered why I didn't get a lot of deep sleep, but that has improved massively. And as a knock-on effect, I can concentrate. Like, I feel like a different person with my levels of concentration. I've always been someone that really struggled hard to focus, and yeah, that has changed. That's been probably the best thing about it, actually, is just how much more alert I feel.
Oh wow, that's interesting. And like I don't know if you had, if you had like gone down the route of thinking about like ADHD and things like that. Did you ever think about that kind of line of things?
Yeah, and apparently there is a link between ADHD and tongue tie.
Yeah, just that occurred to me as you were speaking there that it could be something that I don't know if it would be misdiagnosed as ADHD, but actually it's because of the tongue tie or kind of what way it would be viewed. But I mean that could be easily seen as ADHD symptoms.
Yeah, I've heard people say, and again, I don't know. You're right. If it would be a misdiagnosis or an accurate diagnosis, but being chronically sleep deprived is likely to make a person lack focus and potentially be very hyperactive. So,
For sure.
yeah, they're definitely linked.
Yep, I've definitely experienced that over the last year with a little baba in the house.
Yeah.
But okay, and like just outside the box a little bit, but have you kind of made any comparisons with your like research into tongue ties and some of the other methods of teaching that you use to coach students?
Um, hmm, that's interesting. I don't coach them differently now than I did before. I think that ultimately what you have to do is work with the student the client that's in front of you, which is what I've always done. I think it just gives you more information to work with. I think for me, it's helped me to understand that for some people, there are very real reasons why certain things are hard, and real reasons why for some people the muscle memory doesn't stick. So an exercise can work for someone really well in a lesson, but they come back the next time and it's it's gone again, and you have to do it again. And being a bit nicer, a bit more compassionate, that some people really are trying, and there are often physical reasons as to why they don't progress the same way other people do.
Yeah.
So it's more about figuring out where, when you say, hey, we've been working on this for a while and it hasn't seemed to progress. I wonder if we look into it being something else. And I don't know if that's really what you meant when you're asking me, but that's the main way it's changed.
I think it definitely ties into it. I was kind of thinking more about like the different like training that you have, like say a still and all the different kind of bodies of work that you've studied, I suppose, over the years. Like I wonder if any of it makes more sense or less sense now that you know a bit more about tongue ties.
Um, Not necessarily. I'll tell you what does make more sense to me is that a lot of that is based upon an ideal way in which the body works, and not many people are ideal. Like that didn't come out right, but not many people have like these perfect functional bodies. And what has kind of clicked in my head, and that this is why I've done the Buteyko breathing, is because there are some people who, when you say, hey, do this, and you guide them through an exercise, they either will not understand because their proprioception of their body is not the same as the norm or the average. So the instructions you're giving don't make physical sense to them. They're like, that's not what my body does. I don't get it. Or again, why sometimes it just doesn't work for a certain person, but or even if it does work in the lesson, again, why it doesn't stick long term. I don't think that there's any kind of, the methodologies are all right, they're just kind of based on the way bodies are when there's nothing wrong with them, basically, when they're not restricted. Yeah.
And where would you recommend like singers or vocal coaches or anyone who's working with the voice go to like become more informed about tongue ties?
So there are some really good resources on the internet. There is, so I think he's an ENT in the States called Dr. Zaghi. That's Zaghi. And he has an organisation called, I think it's the Breathe Institute, or is it the Breathe Institute is what I've always called it in my head. Their Instagram has got a lot of good content on it. And he actually released some research last year about how treating tongue tie, an actual peer-reviewed research paper about treating tongue tie in professional singers and professional voice users, and how it reduces symptoms of muscle tension dysphonia. So that would be a really good research article for people to read. There's also the Alabama Tongue Tie Institute, I think it's called. If they're not on Instagram, then Google it. And then Dr. Richard Baxter, he's a dentist from Alabama Tongue Tie, and he wrote a book called Tongue Tied, which is a great book.
Okay, wow.
It's a very good book, actually. It's very in-depth. You'd probably enjoy reading it because a lot of it is about babies as well.
Okay, and is it like a tough read, like, or is it quite?
It's quite an easy read, yeah. I listened to it on Audible when I was walking the dog, but yeah, it's quite.
It's not vocology, like.
Yeah, exactly. It's written for people to understand.
Yeah,
and I believe they give all proceeds to charity as well. So if you like to,
they're brilliant resources. Thanks so much for sharing those. So tell me, like, what are your plans for your own future coaching and your business, and what are your kind of goals going forward?
Oh, okay. Well, I've literally just qualified in the Buteyko breathing method, which is a method. It's all about. It's a functional breathing method that isn't necessarily for singing. So my experience of it, it helped me so much. Is that it's really helpful for singers to have a baseline of functional breathing in the rest of their life, so that when they come to sing, they're already in good habits, and their voice and their body's going to be more adaptable to the work that we do in singing lessons. So I'm going to be doing more of that. Next year, I intend to do some sort of Buteyko breathing boot camps for singers. That will be a big thing. I've been incorporating it into lessons with my clients for a little while now, and it's going really well. And yeah, I would love to work with more. I've got quite a few singers, clients that I work with who are tongue-tied, and I really enjoy that because first of all, I've got some knowledge, but I also seem to have like a physical understanding of how
Yeah,
their
first-hand experience.
bodies work. Yeah. So I would really like to do more of that for sure.
Brilliant. And do you like mainly do one-to-one lessons, or do you do kind of courses or workshops, that kind of thing?
Most of what I do is one-to-one, but like I said, next year I'm going to be doing more workshops and courses, mostly around the Buteyko breathing method. But who knows? Maybe I'll branch out a little bit.
That's fantastic. Very good. And is there anything else that you'd like to like tell the listeners, or have the listeners know? I'll put all your links in the description of the episode, so your website and all your socials and all of that. So, but is there anything else that you'd like to know, or anything upcoming that you'd like them to direct them to?
No, they can find me online if they want to. I think the main thing is it's a personal choice. You don't have to do anything if you don't want to, but that you also might be surprised by how much easier your singing can be if you even do some myofunctional therapy. That would be my takeaway message.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you so much. This has been absolutely fantastic information. I'm definitely going to do some more research myself, and I hope that it helps someone that's listening, um, and kind of equips them with knowledge to move forward and improve their situation. So thank you so much.
No, I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Your Voice Unlocked. A big thank you to Gemma Milburn for sharing her expertise on vocal technique and the fascinating impact of tongue ties on singing. We hope you gained valuable insights that will help you on your musical journey. If you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to subscribe and leave us a review. Join us next time for more tips, stories, and expert advice to help you reach your singing goals. Until then, keep singing and exploring your unique voice.